Hello everyone. Today we're going to be asking the question of whether or not Muhammad was actually a prophet or not. This question is of vital importance because if Muhammad truly was a prophet of God, we should listen to what he says. But if he's not, well then we have to reject him and all of the teachings of the Quran. So how are we supposed to know whether or not someone is a prophet? Well, fortunately, the Bible has very clear instructions on how to tell if someone is truly from God or is just speaking out of the fabrications of their own mind. And thank the Lord for it, because if you are just walking down the street of any major city, chances are you're going to run into someone who claims to be speaking from God. So we are so thankful to the Lord for giving us these clear instructions on how to test whether or not someone is actually speaking of God, so that we can have discernment to know what is right and what is wrong. Now, there's two major criteria for deciding whether or not someone is actually from God or not that are laid out for us in the Bible. The first one is whether or not they can accurately predict the future with 100% accuracy. And the second thing would be miracles, things that are undeniably from God. Even the Quran affirms this. Even the Quran says that only miracles can come from God. So either the prophet has to do a very clear miracle in front of people that can attest to it, or they can accurately predict the future with 100% accuracy. They can't be wrong about any of it. And since the Bible is so clear on testing whether someone is a prophet or not, we see that even in the life of Muhammad, even in the Quran, you have the Jews and the Christians constantly asking for Muhammad for a sign. And what does Muhammad say to them? Is he going to perform a miracle for them? Is he going to predict the future for them? No. The Quran says in Surah 13, verse 7, "The disbelievers say, if only a sign could be sent down to him from his Lord. You, O Prophet, are only a warner, and every people had a guide." Surah 29, 50 and 51 says, "They say, if only some signs had been sent down to him from his Lord. Say, O Prophet, signs are only from Allah, and I am only sent with a clear warning. Is it not enough for them that we have sent down to you the book which is recited to them? Surely in this Quran is a mercy and reminder for people who believe." So we see here that the only miracle that the Quran actually attests to is the miracle of the Quran. So when the Jews and the Christians come up to Muhammad and they're like, give us a sign, show us something that actually proves that you are from God, the only thing that he can present as his quote-unquote miracle is the Quran. Now, I want to make a stark contrast between Muhammad and Jesus. Jesus' whole ministry is just plagued, no pun intended, plagued with miracles. There's miracles left and right. He's constantly healing people, raising people from the dead. He's doing all sorts of miracles. And then his disciples, on top of that, go out and do many miracles. And all of his detractors make no mention of him not doing miracles. In fact, they actually say he is doing them, but he's only doing them by the power of Satan. You see, they blaspheme the Holy Spirit. They can't say that he's not doing them. Everyone sees it. But they would rather say that it's from Satan and not God, which is a little crazy in its own way. But Muhammad, on the other hand, if he is such a great prophet like they claim that he is, he doesn't do miracles like Moses did. He doesn't do miracles or accurately predict the future like Isaiah or Jeremiah or like literally of any of the other prophets. He doesn't do any of that. All that he is a warner. And the so-called miracle that he's supposed to be giving the people is the Quran itself. Now, I've read the Quran twice at least, and it's a little bit hard for me to say that the Quran is a miracle. Now, I'm not reading it in Arabic or anything like that, but it's hard for me to say that the Quran is actually a miracle. And if we're all being perfectly honest and objectively thinking about this, claiming that a book is a miracle and that you can't make any verses like it is a very subjective claim. Very subjective. Saying that it's so perfect in its poetic nature and all these things that it has to be from God. This is extremely, extremely subjective, okay? Now, this is not like arguing about whether or not someone is healed of their blindness or healing their leprosy or something like that. We're talking about something completely subjective, and this is where things get really difficult. Again, stark contrast to literally any of the other prophets in the Bible who all either very clearly, accurately predict the future or do amazing miracles that everybody sees and everyone attests to. You see, this is the big difficulty with Muhammad. When the Jews and the Christians test him according to the Bible, which Muhammad himself tells them to do, when they do this, he has nothing to show for it. If the Quran is his only miracle, that's just not going to cut it. The Christians and the Jews are very used to false prophets rising up. This is not their first rodeo with false prophets, right? This is why the majority of Christians and Jews rejected Muhammad. This is why Muhammad turned on the Christians and the Jews and started persecuting them, because they rejected him. You'll see in the earlier surahs, the earlier books of the Quran, that he's very friendly towards the Jews and the Christians. But it isn't until later on in his quote-unquote ministry that he starts to reject them and starts to turn against them and to wanting to kill them and things like that, because they reject him as a prophet, right? He starts off friendly when they're being friendly to him, but when they realize this guy's not really from God, he starts to hate them. And it's because the Christians and the Jews follow the Bible, okay? They know the verses in the Bible about testing prophets, and they knew to ask him for a sign. You can't just walk around claiming to be speaking for God if you can't prove it, right? It makes no sense. If you really were the greatest prophet, right, you would have probably the greatest signs, right? If you're going to be a prophet like Moses, which is what a lot of Muslims claim that Muhammad is, if he is a prophet like Moses, why can't he do any miracles like Moses? Moses did tons of miracles. So all I'm trying to say is, as a Christian, we have every reason to doubt Muhammad, because we have a long history of amazing miracles. Jesus Christ not just healing tons and tons of people, but also raising himself from the dead. I mean, these are miracles that are attested to, that we have seen, right, that we've heard, that have multiple witnesses. Muhammad, on the other hand, doesn't have any. Now, quick stipulation here. In some of the hadiths, the later hadiths, more like in the 8th and 9th century, which would be about 100, 200 years after Muhammad, this is when you start to get some alleged miracles of Muhammad. Things like the moon splitting and, water coming out of his fingertips and stuff like that. Those things come way later in the hadiths. They're not in the Quran. Over and over again in the Quran, Muhammad says, I don't do miracles, right? So later on, after Muhammad's followers want to give him more, credibility, they start adding these miracles in later. Unlike the Bible, which is right away from the very beginning, from the earliest books, we have attestations of miracles, right? It's unlike that. We have these late sources of the hadiths, the ones that aren't as trustworthy, coming along claiming that Muhammad did miracles. Because I think the Muslims realize we need to add some credibility to this guy. Otherwise, no one's going to believe in him. And they were right. So anyway, I hope this helps some people work through this issue of whether Muhammad was a prophet or not. I'm going to need to see some really hard evidence that he did some miracles. Otherwise, we can't believe in him. If we trust the Bible, like Muhammad told us to do, if we do, we have to reject him as a prophet. Thanks for watching.